Welcome to episode 9 of Basically a Therapist, but without the degree. I'm Lauren Larson, and I am so excited that you're here with me. So, we are in part 2 of conflict resolution. And if you missed part 1, episode 8, go back and listen to that first. We covered what conflict is, we covered what the Bible says about conflict, and there's just some really good stuff in there that I feel like would be a good starting point before we dive into today's episode, which is all about the actual resolution of conflict, how to communicate it, so on and so forth. So let's dive in. So let's talk about the conflict resolution process and just the different steps that are included in there. So step 1 is to shift your mindset. I talked about this in the last episode, but when you view something as negative, you're going to believe that it's negative. And like I said last week at the beginning, conflict isn't bad. It's how it's handled that's healthy or unhealthy. And so when we shift our mindset on conflict to look at it as an opportunity for growth and not a threat to our love, that's going to be a game changer in how we show up in conflict. Because we're not going to show up to it with a sense of like a scarcity mindset. We're coming at it with this confidence that this is an opportunity to grow not only myself, but our relationship. And this isn't a threat to our love, but this is normal, this is healthy, and this is good for us. Another one is conflict is an opportunity for connection. It's an opportunity to learn about yourself, and it's an opportunity to learn about your relationship and about the other person and to understand how they operate. It's an opportunity to strengthen that connection. Another way that you can shift your mindset is by looking at conflict objectively. So when you're looking at something objectively, it means that you're not influenced by another person's viewpoint. You have an unbiased view that's not based on your personal preferences. So when we look at things objectively, it helps us not to take things personally. And what I like to say is when we are in conflict, actually, this is true for just taking offense in general, but when we are in conflict, we have the opportunity to choose whether or not we're taking something personally. Yes, somebody can insult us. Somebody can say hurtful things. Somebody can be mean. But it doesn't mean that you need to choose to take it personally. You can know that what they're saying is about them and not about you. Because I've said it before, but how somebody reacts is a reflection on themselves and not on you. And so when we take this 30,000 foot view of a situation or of a person, we take out our feelings. We kind of take ourselves out of a situation. Think of it like this. When a friend comes to you with an issue, or anybody comes to you with an issue, you can see from an outsider's perspective things that they may not be able to see. And you're also not taking it personally. And I kind of want you to do the same for yourself. Step back, look at everything objectively, look at it from an outsider's perspective, and don't take anything personally. Other people's stuff isn't about you. It's just not. It's hard. It's hard when it's hurled at you. It's hard when it's taken out on you. Nobody is discounting that. It is hard. And I want to validate that for you. It is hard when somebody is hurtful or mean or rejects you. But it is not about you. Step 2 in the conflict resolution process. This is where you're going to recognize conflict. Sometimes people don't even realize they're in conflict. And so we're just going to kind of look at some hints that other people can give you to help you recognize that there might be some conflict. Number one, verbal clues. Pay attention to heated discussions, raised voices, shouting, harsh language. That's an obvious one. Number two, nonverbal communication. So body language is a huge one. Defensive postures or, avoiding eye contact or anything like that. The silent treatment. If somebody is unusually quiet or avoiding communication with you, it's a pretty good indicator. When it's tense or hostile, complaints and criticisms, avoidance, when people go out of their way to avoid you or a topic, change in behavior. When you notice people have changed their behavior, such as they're more irritable or they're withdrawn or they're defensive or you can't joke with them like you used to. Those are some clues. Gossiping, that's a big one. When you hear somebody talking about somebody negatively behind their back, that's an issue. That's a pretty big indicator that there's an issue. Step 3 in the conflict resolution process is active listening and empathy. We're going to dive into this a little bit more because I think that people have a wrong perception of what it means to actively listen and empathize. And so I'm going to break some of that down for you. So number 1, active listening. I love this quote. Seek to understand, then to be understood. Seek to understand, then to be understood. That's from Stephen Covey of the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Active listening is a communication technique where the listener is focused fully on what the person is saying and is engaging in the conversation. It involves your full attention on the person speaking, making eye contact, providing, cues that you're listening, like, yes, I understand, nodding, just engaging with the person. Because if you are somebody that is on your phone or you're not making eye contact and you're just looking elsewhere, it doesn't really look like you're paying attention, that you're engaged. So stay locked in. Let them know. Lean in. Let them know that you're there with them, that they're not alone. Also, active listening requires not interrupting the speaker and waiting for them to finish. I know that this is hard. I know. I am an interrupter. And I have a good excuse. I forget very easily what I'm going to say all the time. Ask anybody around me. I constantly forget. And so if you're like me, you may want to try to hurry up and get it out. But I would ask you to refrain, because I think that when you are fully listening, it's going to change the conflict resolution. It's going to change the way the person feels. Also, paraphrasing or summarizing what you've heard from the speaker to confirm that you understand what's been said. So this can look like, so it sounds like you're upset because blah, blah, blah. Did I get that right? Or what I'm understanding is you feel this because this. Did I get that right? That's it. You're not agreeing. You're just A, showing them that you're engaged, and B, trying to understand and letting them know that that is something that you want out of this process, is to understand them. And then if you don't understand, we can start over calmly. So active listening aims to create an environment where the person speaking feels heard and valued and respected and seen. And this is really, really important as the listener. It's going to lower some defenses. It's going to open them up a little bit more. It's going to show that you care for them. It's going to show that you care about the connection with them. It says a lot. Just actively listening says a lot. Oh, and by the way, actively listening doesn't include providing solutions or trying to fix the problem. I'm just going to say that. Number 2, empathy. So let's talk about what empathy is. Like, let's define that. So empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of another person. It involves putting yourself in the other person's shoes and trying to see things from their perspective. That's all empathy is your ability to understand where they're coming from. Again, this does not mean agreement. So it's not just recognizing the emotions of others, but it's also demonstrating that recognition through your care and your support. Empathy requires a genuine and compassionate response. Whether it's joy or sadness or frustration or anger, it's feeling what they feel with them. In empathy, it helps build trust and connections with others because it shows that you care about their feelings and that you're willing to support them. And during this process, I want to encourage you to stay curious. So instead of assigning judgment or blame or any other labels that you want to put on the person or the situation, just stay curious. Stay curious about them. Stay curious about their experience. Because even though it may not be how you experience something, it is how they experience something. And usually there's a reason why they've experienced something the way that they have. Again, as I said last week, we all have our own filters and perceptions of how we view this world and how we view other people. And it is completely influenced by our childhood, by our relationships, by our friendships, by trauma, by experiences, by so many different things. And so somebody can say a certain phrase and they hear it one way, and then another person can hear the same phrase and they hear it a completely different way. Just keep that in mind, that we all have different ways that we are processing and filtering information. So stay curious. So let's talk about defusing emotions. I said this last week. This was my tip that I gave at the very end. But take ownership of your part from the get-go. Take ownership. So before you bring your grievances to other people, own your part in the conflict. This will disarm them and it will relieve tension immediately. Because like I said last week, think about this. Like, somebody's all riled up. They're ready to go in. They're ready to go in on you. They have a whole laundry list of things that you've done. And then you come to them and you say, I'm sorry for doing blah, blah, blah. And they're like, oh, I didn't even have to bring this up. Wow. And then they kind of like, okay, they can see their part. They have some self-awareness. They understand. And then you can start the repairing process if they've said everything that they needed to say. Sometimes people still need to externally process and get everything off their chest. And that's when we go into active listening. So, in diffusing emotions, step 1, take ownership of your part immediately. Step 2, Stay calm and speak in love and respect. Never, ever raise your voice. Never name call. Never call them outside of their name. Don't make fun of them. Don't get petty. Don't get passive aggressive. None of it's cute. It's just not cute. It's so unattractive and it's immature and it's unhealthy. Don't do it. Here's one that I see a lot of people struggle with. Validate their feelings. Validate. So I want to kind of address a myth about validation because I think that a lot of people believe validation means agreement. Validation does not equal agreement. It does not equal agreement. When you validate somebody, it does not say, you are right. I agree with everything you're saying. Validation is letting them know that you can understand why they feel the way they feel, or you can understand how they saw something the way that they did. You can understand it. Yeah, I get that. I get how you can see that. Did you hear agreement? Did you hear, you're right, I did that wrong? Or you're right, that was messed up. Or you're right, I should have done things differently. No, you're just saying, I understand why you see the way you see it. Period. Validate, validate, validate. It is so huge. It is so huge when you can validate somebody. My husband and I were recently on a road trip, and I brought up something that I had been struggling with, and it was a little bit of a heavy topic, and he got very quiet, uncomfortably quiet. And so I sat there because I'm working on not trying to save people from what they're feeling and thinking. I'm allowing people to feel what they feel without trying to fix the situation, not trying to make it better. And so I just sat there and let him process the way that he needed to process. And, after several long, uncomfortable moments, he turned to me and he said, I want you to know that I heard you. I know that this is important to you. And he said back to me what I had told him or shared with him. And he said, I just need some time to process. Perfect. I was totally fine. I was totally fine after that. He didn't agree with anything. He didn't agree to anything that I had asked. He just validated that he had heard me, that he had seen me, and he knows where I'm coming from. And it was amazing. It was one of the most connecting conversations we've ever had because of that one single sentence. It was incredible. Another way to diffuse emotions is that if you need to, just take a break. If the conversation is getting really heated, take a break. Or if it's getting nowhere and you're just kind of repeating and nobody is really able to understand and you've been going at it for a really long time, walk away. It's okay. Don't just walk away without talking about it first. That's rude. But make a plan to come back in, I don't know, an hour, 2 hours, the next morning. I don't know, whatever works for you too, but come to a understanding, come to an agreement for the both of you, because there are some people with an anxious attachment that need reassurance and they need to know that you are going to come back to the conversation and finish it. You just need some time. There are some people that hate having conflict looming over them and they just want to get it over with. There's different conflict styles. And that's going to be a part 3. However, come to an agreement that you two will come back to handle the situation once things are smoothed over for you emotionally, once you're more calm. There's nothing wrong with that. I know everybody uses the verse about not letting the sun go down on your anger. Like I said last week, let the sun go down. You don't have to be angry with one another. You can just say hey, this is important to me. You are important to me. And I want to make sure that I am fresh and that I am calm and that I am capable of having a healthy conversation with you, and I'm going to need a break in order to do that. Can we try this again in an hour? And then go your separate ways. Another step in the conflict resolution process is to start working on solutions. So find common ground and work towards solutions together. I want to give you a tip to remain open-minded. Again, we're staying curious about the person, about their experience, about the situation. We are staying open-minded. We're not assigning judgment. We're not assigning labels. So remain open-minded to brainstorm with them and create possible solutions that work best for the both of you. Sometimes this will include getting creative. It involves thinking creatively to identify a lot of different solutions. There could be several different solutions, and we all have different ways on how we look at things. We all have different outlooks on life. And so be open-minded to hear solutions from the other person. Create a solution together. Like I said earlier, open-mindedness. Open-mindedness would look like a willingness to explore different perspectives and ideas without immediately dismissing them. This is so important. This is so important to not dismiss your partner. Don't dismiss them like, oh, that was dumb, or no, absolutely not. Even if you don't like it right off the bat, say, okay, thank you for that. Even if you know that there's just no way, or you're just not interested, or you just don't like that idea, it's okay. It's okay. You can still thank them for their idea without dismissing it. It can still be put on the table. It can still be written down as an idea, but don't dismiss. Because you want to collaborate. This is the next one. Collaborate with them. Generate solutions in a collaborative effort. After brainstorming, it's important to evaluate the solutions that you guys came up with and evaluate them based on their feasibility, their effectiveness, their potential rewards and consequences. Like, look through them together and see, like, really, really comb through them and see what's going to work best for the both of you. And then once you've evaluated, prioritize a list of potential solutions and prioritize them based on their relevance and their potential impact on the relationship and on each other. Sometimes you're going to have to sacrifice. Sometimes you're going to have to do what's best for your partner or the other party. Sometimes you have to put yourself last. That's what Jesus does. And then once you find a solution, go into action mode. Develop a plan if you need to. Check back in with one another. It doesn't have to be just like a boundary. It doesn't have to be forever. It can be changed. You can try a solution for a week, see how it feels, 2 weeks, and then circle back and see if it's working for you too. And if it's not, go back to your list that you collaborated on and go to the next one that you prioritize. That was number 2 on the list, and then number 3, and then number 4. Try different things. Be curious about it together. It is you two against the problem because you guys are a team. You're a team. You guys are together against the problem, not against each other. And I think when you start to look at these problems or these conflicts or these situations that you're dealing with as a team, as I mentioned last week, I think that this should be our life verse in general. I think we should go around with this verse at the forefront of our mind on our phone's home screen or lock screen or all the screens. It should just be everywhere all the time. But Ephesians 6:12, it says, "For we are not fighting against flesh and blood enemies, but against evil rulers and authorities of the unseen world, against mighty powers in this dark world, and against evil spirits in the heavenly places." The enemy wants to keep you disconnected. He wants to keep you angry. He wants to keep you mad at other people, offended, hurt, confused. Those are all things from the enemy. That is not of God. And so when we start to realize that the things that we are handling, the things that we are dealing with are from the enemy, we look at people and conflict and situations differently. And then Ephesians 6:13 says, "Therefore put on every piece of God's armor, so you will be able to resist the enemy in the time of evil. Then after the battle, you will still be standing firm." Verse 14, "Stand your ground, putting on the belt of truth and the body armor of God's righteousness. For shoes, put on peace that comes from the good news, so that you will be fully prepared. In addition to all of these, hold up the shield of faith to stop the fiery arrows of the devil. Put on salvation as your helmet and take the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God." Because let me remind you of this. The person that you are in conflict with is a child of God. Period. Child of God. And so when you look at your spouse as the daughter of God, as the son of God, when you look at them like that, when you look at them through the lens of Jesus, when you look at them through the lens of a heavenly perspective, you show up differently. You look at them differently. You treat them differently. How would you treat the person that you're in conflict with if God was in the room? Because he is. God's in the room. Because he's in you. He's in them. He's all around. Treat others with respect. Treat others with love. That is the golden rule that Jesus said many times while he was on earth. Love your neighbor as you love yourself. I also feel like I need to say this too. God is not a God of condemnation or shame. And so if there's something that somebody has done that you don't agree with, and that has caused conflict, or even if it hasn't, you just don't agree with it, shame and condemnation are not the way. It is not what God does. He's never shamed us. He doesn't shame us. Jesus even stated that he never came to condemn the world. Let me find that verse real quick, actually. John 3:17. I knew it was that. "For God did not send his son into the world to condemn the world, but to save the world through him." This need to condemn, this need to shame people for making a mistake or for doing something that we don't agree with is not a godly characteristic. It's a characteristic that you learned from a human who has been shamed or condemned. That's how they were taught. And maybe it makes you feel better when you put somebody down. But I want you to know that's not from God. You know, that's how I kind of grew up, like in the church in the 90s, early 2000s, in the legalistic Baptist church that I was a part of. It was very shame focused. Just a lot of shame around mistakes. And that's not what Jesus was when he was on earth. You know, I think about the woman at the well who, you know, like had 5 husbands. And he kind of calls her out on it gently. And she's like, I'm not married right now, but I'm living with a guy. He's like, I know. Turn from your sin and sin no more. That was it. Or the time when the Pharisees found the woman caught in the act of adultery and threw her out in front of Jesus, probably naked, in public, shaming her, humiliating her in front of people, in front of men. And Jesus says, any of you without sin, throw the first stone. And then he looks up and he says, where are your accusers? And she says, they're gone. And he's like, go and sin no more. He doesn't name call her. He doesn't put her down. He doesn't say how awful she is, how terrible she is. There's no shame. There's only love. And I want that to be the theme of your conflicts, is to have conflict in love. Set aside your condemnation and your shame. It's not from God. And if you have God living in you, and if you are shaming somebody or condemning somebody thinking that it'll make them change, it's not. It's going to make them stop coming to you. It's going to hurt the relationship. They're going to start hiding. I think of a parent-child relationship right now where maybe a child is messing up or has messed up. And maybe as a parent, you think that shame or condemnation is part of the discipline process, and it's not. You know, when I was caught up in sexual sin years ago, over 10 years ago, I remember God, I was packing an overnight bag to go to a guy's house. And I remember coming out of the bathroom to like put my toothbrush in my bag or whatever. And literally, it was brought to my knees, literally. And I felt God's gentle, powerful conviction to not go, to stop doing what I was doing, to sin no more. He convicted me without condemning me. He convicted me without shaming me. He was so gentle, he was so kind, and he was so loving. And he was saying, this needs to be done. There's a different way for you. There's a better way. And it truly was like a Saul on Damascus Road moment that I will never, ever forget, ever. It changed my life. I grew up in the church. I grew up going to church my entire life. I got saved when I was 6, baptized when I was 7. And I never had a relationship with God. It was always about rules. And if you broke the rules, there was shame. You were wrong. You were bad. But I'm here to tell you that if you mess up, if you break the rules, you're not a bad person. But God has a love for you that is so gentle, and he has a life for you that is so amazing, and he has a freedom for you that is unlike anything else. That was quite the tangent, but that is what came over me just now, and I feel like I needed to say that. So here we are. There is going to be a part 3 next week on conflict resolution. Thank you so much for being here. I am just so honored that you are here with me. Like and subscribe. And if you're really feeling this episode, share it with a friend that you think that it will encourage and help on their journey. Bye.
Yeah.